I'm so glad to have you back with us for yet another edition in the Beyond Addiction series. My name is Adrian Webster. 2 episodes ago, we began a little journey into a subsection of the Beyond Addiction series, which was entitled Under the Radar, where we were speaking about socially acceptable drugs. We've spoken about caffeine, and we've challenged your thinking on that one. We've spoken about tobacco and how it works. And now we want to move on to another very prominent, socially acceptable drug, and that is alcohol. We want to talk about some of the science behind this substance. It's known as ethanol in more technical language. And here's a little World Health Organization survey, a map of the world in which they've highlighted by using color the number of pure alcohol liters that are consumed on average by the drinking population. Now, by pure alcohol liters, what we mean is we're not talking about 1 liter of brandy or 1 liter of scotch. We're talking about the 43% of that alcohol out of that bottle, which is added up. So it's the actual alcohol content, the amount of pure alcohol that is consumed over a year in these areas of the world. The darker the color, the more purple the color, the higher the number of alcohol liters are consumed by those who drink in that country. So let's go through the globe here and have a little look. In the area of the Russian Federation and the Ukraine, about 16.5 liters of absolute alcohol is consumed per drinker 15 years and older per year. I mean, that's quite a bit of pure alcohol, isn't it? 89% of men and 81% of women are drinkers. 18.6% are estimated to be heavy drinkers, and they have a drinking pattern of 3.6. Now let me pause for a moment and just explain this drinking pattern. The World Health Organization gives a drinking pattern scale of 1 to 4. 1 is the most harmless and 4 is the most dangerous. It's based on, for instance, how many heavy drinking episodes a person has, whether they drink only at meal times or whether they drink outside of meal times, whether they engage in fiesta type drinking, and whether or not they are drinking in public places and that kind of thing, or whether it's a more personal thing quietly at home. So the closer you get to 4, the more negative it is in those 4 areas. And so in the Russian Federation and the Ukraine, 3.6, that is a phenomenally dangerous drinking pattern of those who drink. When we go over to the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, we see that they're not far off. They are drinking 15.1 liters of absolute alcohol per drinker, 15 years and older. 90% of men and 81% of women are drinkers, and 15.7% are estimated to be heavy drinkers. Fortunately, their drinking pattern is much lower than the Russian Federation and Ukraine. They come in at a 1.3 on the scale of danger for drinking. Then when we go over to Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, we find that they consume about 10.4 absolute liters of alcohol per drinker, 15 years and older. 87% of men are drinkers, 77% of women are drinkers. 4.2%, that's quite a low percentage actually, 4.2% are estimated to be heavy drinkers, and they have a drinking pattern rating of 1.2. So not too bad, although really we want to move away from the alcohol, as you will see throughout this lecture. When we go to the northern continent of the Americas, to Canada and Cuba and the United States, we find that they consume about 14.3 liters of absolute alcohol per drinker 15 years and older. 73% of women and 73% of men and 58% of women are drinkers. 11.2% are estimated to be heavy drinkers, and they have a drinking pattern rating of 2.0. Now we come to a little country at the bottom of the African continent, the country of South Africa. About 16.6 liters of absolute alcohol are consumed per drinker, 15 years and older, per year. 55% of men and 30% of women are drinkers, and 10.3% are estimated to be heavy drinkers. They have a drinking pattern of 3.1, so getting quite close to the worst in the world, which is that Russian Federation and the Ukraine geographical area. You know, what we're trying to picture for you here with this World Health Organization survey of the countries of the world and what their drinking patterns are, is that you can see alcohol is consumed worldwide. And very, very high percentages of country populations are drinking alcohol. And a fair percentage of those drinkers are also heavy drinkers. It is a worldwide phenomenon. So how do you know if you are actually heading in the direction of alcoholism? Well, you're not just drinking socially, but you are actually physically addicted. What are the signs, the symptoms that someone could be classified as a full-blown alcoholic? Well, first of all, from the Journal of Neuroscience, we get these 4 observations. Alcoholism is characterized by compulsive preoccupation with obtaining alcohol. So all the person wants to do, they're thinking about the next drink, where they're going to stop, where's the nearest bottle store, always wanting to get more alcohol, never satisfied with just being without alcohol for a little while. Second characteristic, a loss of control over consumption. So I cannot drink just 1 glass of red wine, but I have to drink the bottle. Not just 1 beer, but a 6 or a 12 pack or a carton full. I can't just have a tot of tequila, but I have to have the whole bottle. We lose control over our consumption of alcohol. It's an ongoing thing. Another sign is the development of tolerance and dependence. So I have to drink more to get my high, just like any other drug addict using any other drug. I eventually develop a tolerance to the substance, and in a little while we're going to the neurobiology, and you will understand how that happens. It works the same way as any of the more hardcore drugs. The same principles apply. So the person develops a tolerance, and therefore they have to start drinking more, and if they're not drinking, they have negative side effects, and so they become dependent. They fall into this cycle of dependency and addiction. And then the 4th characteristic is impaired social and occupational functioning. So we are unable to have healthy relationships anymore because we're drunk. Perhaps we become violent when we're drunk. We start to jeopardize our relationships. We cannot work anymore. It's actually getting in the way of our work performance. Our functioning is beginning to drop off because we're spending so much time drunk, so much time inebriated, so much time at the bar, so much time pursuing the alcohol consumption goal of our lives. So when you have any of those signs or a combination of those signs, certainly if all 4 are there, you might be at a stage where you have developed full-blown alcoholism. So let's have a look at the neurobiology here. From the Journal of Neuroscience, we note that ethanol, or alcohol, increases the firing of the dopamine neurons in the ventral tegmental area through direct excitatory cellular activation. So the alcohol itself causes the firing of these dopamine-rich neurons. These dopamine, you'll remember, is that neurotransmitter that gives you the sense of reward, the sense of pleasure. It's the prevalent neurotransmitter in the reward pathway of the brain, and the alcohol actually excites the firing of the dopamine neurons in the ventral tegmental area. VTA, remember? Do you remember the neurobiology, the structure of the brain? The VTA is the first part of the reward pathway. VTA, nucleus accumbens, prefrontal cortex, all connected with this dopamine-saturated area of neurons, and so the alcohol causes artificial firing, if you like, of those dopamine neurons in the VTA. That tricks the brain into thinking it needs to give you pleasure. The ethanol also elevates levels of extracellular dopamine in the nucleus accumbens and the central amygdala. So in addition to causing firing in the VTA, it actually causes the release of dopamine in the second part of the reward pathway, the nucleus accumbens, more dopamine in the synapse, greater exciting experience for the postsynaptic system, starts firing like mad in the nucleus accumbens and the central amygdala as well, and so the VTA is going nuts, the nucleus accumbens and the central amygdala is going nuts, and so this whole reward pathway is beginning to kick into action to give you the sense of reward and euphoria. Furthermore, ethanol increases the extracellular endorphin levels of the nucleus accumbens. So not only the dopamine system, but the endorphins. The endorphins, you will remember, are that neurotransmitter family, which are like the opiate drugs. Removes pain, gives you a sense of well-being. It's the neurotransmitters that are released at greater volume when you start to do exercise, and it gives you that sense of what psychologists call the runner's high, where you have the sense of well-being and pleasure after you've done exercise where you've moderately exerted yourself, the pain-killing neurotransmitters are released through deep breathing and elevated heart rate and so on. Well, alcohol also releases them, and that's part of what creates the sense of euphoria, the sense of well-being, the happy-go-lucky attitude that mild intoxication brings. Ethanol interferes also with adenosine, another neurotransmitter, actually a neuromodulator to be more exact, and it thus alters second-level messenger molecules in the cells, causing miscommunication. So, inside the brain there is this cascade effect. One, the release of a chemical here reacts over here to release other chemicals or to stop the release of other chemicals. There are things going on inside the cells with calcium and potassium and little ions that are floating around, and these neurotransmitters open these channels and they close these channels, and adenosine is supposed to do a certain work that enhances communication between cells. But now you drink your alcohol, the ethanol prevents adenosine from doing its job effectively, which cascades into the second-level molecules, messenger molecules inside the cells, not doing their thing properly. They miscommunicate, things go wrong inside of the cell, and it alters the way you think, and that is what is responsible for the symptoms of intoxication. Being unable to coordinate your movements, staggering, slurring of speech, not thinking clearly, not making sense. Yes, because inside your brain, you're short-circuiting it, you're causing miscommunication with the molecules that are inside the cells of the neurons, and so they cannot do their work properly, and you experience this in terms of the symptoms of intoxication. In the Journal of Human Molecular Genetics, we read the following, that ethanol affects genes that control neurite outgrowth and formation of excitatory and inhibitory synapses in the VTA. Fancy medical terminology, what does it mean in layman's term? Well, very simple. Just like with all the other drugs, the more we expose the neurons to this substance called ethanol or alcohol, it will actually, on a genetic level, change the way new outgrowths develop. Excitatory and inhibitory synapses. In other words, the way these neurons physically grow out is determined by turning on and off certain little switches inside the genetic code. Alcohol will do that on a genetic level and change the very structure of your brain, change the way the brain develops and makes new synapses and new connections as time goes on. If you're exposing your brain to this poison, it will adapt. Thus, ethanol results in persistent structural and functional changes within the ventral tegmental area. Notice the word persistent. In other words, after I have stopped drinking, the changes that have been induced genetically, the changes that have been induced and manifested in structural abnormalities, structural changes, will persist for a time. So recovery from alcohol is indeed something that requires time to undo the damage which we have done again over time. So what are the effects of alcohol? Well, knowing the neurobiology, we can run through this very quickly. You can understand why it's going to cause these results. It creates euphoria because it's activating the dopamine system. It's activating the endorphin system. It causes relaxation. It causes staggering and disorientation because of that interference with adenosine and second-level messenger molecules not doing their work properly, miscommunication between the cells. It causes blurred vision for the same reason, and of course vomiting. When we get to a certain level of ethanol intoxication, the body starts to try to purge itself by emptying the stomach contents, just like it would with heroin overdose or anything else. The body will seek to actually try and get this poison out, any of the excess that may still be in the stomach. And so we have that wonderful experience of regurgitating our food. Dependence and addiction is, of course, also a physical effect or side effect of ethanol. We know very well that alcoholism is a very big problem. It's one of the leading reasons why people check themselves in to rehab clinics and the like. It also puts us at risk, increased risk for injury. How many car accidents, falls, and fires have not been started because someone was drunk? They fell asleep with a kerosene lamp in their little hut, in their little shack, or in their house, or wherever, still burning. They bumped it over. They didn't know what they were doing. They could not react in time to the red light or to the child running across the road while they were driving. They were disoriented and they fell down and they cut their head open because they were staggering because of the effects of alcohol. Sports and recreational injuries are a result of alcohol. You know, people go swimming and they get themselves drunk at the beach over the holiday season, and they go swimming and they get themselves into trouble out there and they drown, or something along those lines. We also have self-inflicted injuries as a part of that, and interpersonal violence. A lot of people, when they get drunk, they become obnoxious. They start looking for a fight. You get some drunkards, which are, well, quite pleasant, actually, and they're just, whatever, they mind their own business. And you get others who actually become aggressive and intolerant, and it's a strange thing. People may know that they are the type that becomes aggressive. They become violent when they are drinkers, and the strange thing is they still go and drink. You'd think that people like that would have the intelligence to realize it's not making it fun for anybody else, and it's certainly not making it fun for me, so why persist in this behavior? But that's exactly what addiction is all about. We see the negative consequences, we know it's hurting us, we know it's hurting others around us, but we go seeking out that behavior, those substances anyway, because we think it's going to give us some sort of reward that overrides the risk of the side effects, the negative side effects. Also, drinking alcohol increases our risk of physical disease. Alcohol is one of the number one killers in terms of disease. Liver cirrhosis, where the liver loses its plasticity and it becomes unable to cleanse the body of impurities and so on. Your liver is integral to the cleansing system. You do not want to be destroying the liver because of alcohol. Alcohol just dries it up, as it were. Increased risk of hemorrhagic stroke, increased risk of cancer of the mouth, of the oropharynx, of the esophagus, of the liver, of the breast. It's a big factor when it comes to cancer risk. Cancer is becoming so common in our societies. We actually need to be looking for ways to reduce our exposure to carcinogens. A carcinogen is something that promotes the growth of cancer. We need to be reducing our exposure to carcinogens. Alcohol is not an essential part of life. Why not simply remove it from our lifestyle if we're serious about not getting cancer? Friends, it affects all the various organs of the body in some negative way. We really do not want to be playing with this drug. It causes cardiomyopathy and polyneuropathy. This is damage to the heart muscle and damage to the nerve system, so that these systems no longer function as they ought to. Alcoholic gastritis, where the stomach becomes upset and irritated as a result of this alcoholic stimulant and irritant that we take in. And of course, it's a well-known fact that alcoholic beverages place our unborn children at risk. We run the risk of fetal alcohol syndrome, where we actually damage the brain of the unborn child so they may never achieve and be what they might have been intellectually had the mother not been drinking. We have the risk of low birth weight and spontaneous abortion, of premature births, and of fetal damage, deformities of various types that can be caused by exposing the fetus to alcohol through the mother's blood supply. I was shocked. I remember when my wife was pregnant and we had a certain gynecologist that we would go and see, how the gynecologist would tell us, and we were not drinkers, fortunately, but how the advice would be, it doesn't matter, you can carry on, drinking your coffee and drinking your wine. Don't worry about it. A little bit's not going to hurt. Are you willing to take that risk with your unborn child? Doctors should be responsible and be saying, especially if you are pregnant, stay 1,000,000 miles away from these substances. Even if your intention is to continue drinking after pregnancy and hopefully only after you've finished breastfeeding process, mothers. But listen, if you are going to make that choice for yourself, please stay away from alcohol during pregnancy. Do not drink while you're pregnant. It's not just your life you're gambling with. It's not just your quality of life. It's also that of your unborn child, their intellectual capacity, their ability to succeed at life. We want to be staying away from this, especially when we are pregnant, friends. What about the psychological effects of alcohol? Well, reduced reaction time, reduced inhibitions. That's one of the reasons people drink, in fact. They may be a little bit timid, a little bit shy. You get a few drinks in your system, and before you know it, you're dancing on the tables without a care or concern for who's watching. Of course, you'll also know that that's why it's quite amusing sometimes to watch alcoholics or drinkers or those who are drunk. They can be quite entertaining. Of course, it's usually with the price tag of letting go of their personal dignity. It can cause confusion and misunderstanding. It can cause depression, because actually alcohol is not a stimulant. It is a central nervous system depressant. Its initial effects in small quantities may be to stimulate, but in larger quantities it actually depresses, and it can encourage the emotional experience of depression, even clinical depression. It aggravates the problem of epilepsy. So if you have a problem with that, you do not want to be drinking. It also can cause alcohol psychosis, a state of extreme paranoia and anxiety. But somebody's going to say, yes, I know the risk factors, and we've heard that song and dance before, but you know that the latest research is telling us that moderate drinking is good for us. A glass of red wine or a little bit of beer or whatever the case may be, just a little bit of social drinking or a little bit of drinking with your meals, that is good for you. Is it true? Is it true that there are some health benefits to be gained by consuming alcohol? Well, if I said no, I would be lying to you. Scientifically, yes, there are some benefits associated with drinking. For instance, they say it lowers your blood pressure, it lowers your stress, and it lowers your risk of ischemic and hemorrhagic stroke. So there are some of the benefits. But you know what? There are perceived benefits with smoking. There are perceived benefits with taking caffeine into the system. There are perceived benefits even with some of the other more hardcore drugs. But the perceived risks outweigh the perceived benefits. So don't think that just because in the newspaper you've read about some of the blessings of moderate drinking, that means it would be safe for you. And don't think that you will drink for these reasons. In fact, you know what, in my personal analysis, as I've listened to people talk about, why you should drink from a positive perspective, the reality is, I think, we are just looking for some positive news article to justify what we're already doing. We may know that there are risks, and now we find some good news that enables us to continue to do what we're doing with freedom of conscience. Are we really doing it for the health benefits? I mean, think about it. If we're really doing it for the benefits of the cardiovascular system, shouldn't we be out there getting exercise? Shouldn't we be making sure that we eat foods with no cholesterol, moving over to a plant-based vegetarian diet? No, don't touch my plate. Don't tell me that I must do exercise. Don't tell me that I must change my lifestyle towards a more healthy lifestyle. I want to continue living my old sinful ways. I want to continue doing all the wrong things, but now I found a reason to also include my drinking in that process because it has some benefits to the cardiovascular system, etc., etc. No. Think about this, friends. Are you really saying that there are benefits to drinking because you really are doing this as a health practice? If you are, then you should also be doing the other practices that get you benefits to the cardiovascular system. But we don't want to exercise. We don't want to change our lifestyle for the positive. We are just looking for a scientific justification for our otherwise unhealthy habits. And remember that as well as reaping a few positive benefits, we're also going to reap the risk factors associated with it. So let's have a look at some of those risk factors, and here are just a few. What about the risk of impaired reasoning, making the wrong moral decisions? And you don't have to be stone drunk for this effect to take effect. You can be rather in the moderate frame of just being sort of tipsy. You've just had a drink or two, but you're already not beginning to think clearly. Your inhibitions and your guard is coming down. What about the risk that moderate drinking often leads to heavier drinking? Oh, that won't happen to you, right? It only happens to the guy next door. Well, that's what he thought about his neighbor, and now he's a heavy drinker. You see, how do you know you're not that person? It starts off with a moderate drinking under the guise of health benefits, and before you know it, you're a heavy drinker. You're not drinking for your health and for your heart. You're drinking to enjoy the pleasures of the euphoria and the getting drunk experience. What about the risk of bone damage? Did you know that alcohol interferes with the formation of bone inside of the bone marrow and so on? Do you realize that it can promote osteoporosis? So while I may be encouraging some heart health on some level, although it does, as we saw before, the risk factor of cardiomyopathy, damage to the heart muscle, so I may be lowering my blood pressure in one way, but I'm damaging the heart muscle in another. So I'm sacrificing one form of heart health for one form of heart disease. I mean, do you see here that it's a trade-off? You really cannot promote alcohol as a health beverage, as a health drink. It just makes no sense, friends. What about the risk of cardiac damage, as we've said, or of breast cancer, or one of the many other risk factors? In fact, even the World Health Organization, as they analyze the trade-off between, the positive effects of alcohol and the negative effects of alcohol, they make the following statement in one of their reports. They say, there are more life years lost due to alcohol consumption than deaths prevented. So when you look at the number of years that a young person's life is cut short at the age of 20 or 21 because they died of liver cirrhosis, or they died of a car accident because they were under the influence or whatever. When you take the number of years that are cut off of people's life because of the death factor associated with alcohol, the risk factors, and then you compare the number of years that are lost, you add them all up on average, and then you compare that to the number of years that are apparently saved, the extension of life that's granted through extra heart health because you drank your glass of red wine or whatever the case may be. The World Health Organization openly recognizes we cannot promote this as a health drink because actually it's costing us more in terms of years that are lost than lives which are saved. So don't fall for the lie. Don't fall for the scientific justification of the carnal nature to justify why I drink. If you're going to drink, then drink. But don't do it as a health benefit. Don't try and influence others into drinking because it's going to benefit their health, their heart health. No, go get some exercise. Go get some sunlight. Go get some good, healthy nutrition. And you won't have to worry about trying to promote heart health by the use of a beverage which has all sorts of other negative consequences associated with it. I just love this statement from the book, The Ministry of Healing, where it says, moderate drinking is the school in which men are educated for the drunkard's career. The benefits of moderate drinking are extolled in our newspapers and on our televisions, and we don't realize that there's a very real risk factor here. No one wakes up and says, I want to be an alcoholic, that's the great goal of my life. They all start out somewhere with moderate drinking, and what this author very astutely has pointed out is that, guess what? How does it go? Moderate drinking is the school in which men are educated for the drunkard's career. So we don't even want to go and sign up in that school. We don't even want to enroll as a subject of learning in the school of moderate drinking, because we may very well be the one who ends up as a drunkard, professional drunkard. The bottom line, friends, is really quite simple. In Proverbs 23, verse 31 to 32, it says the following: do not look on the wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it swirls around smoothly. At the last it bites like a serpent and it stings like a viper. You see, the bottom line, friends, is that alcohol does not deliver on the benefits that it offers as reward. Alcohol may have some positive effects, and the Bible warns us. It warns us against moderate drinking. It says, listen, you look at that glass there, the wine is swirling, it's got that great fragrance. You think, I'll just have one. But before you know it, you're drunk. It always starts with just one, right? It always starts with just this once, just this one drink, and before you know it, you're a drug addict. You are controlled by alcohol or tobacco or the other harder drugs, whatever the case may be. The only safe course is to avoid them entirely and completely. So do not continue to fall for the scientific justification of the desire to drink by using some sort of scientific method to say, hey, there's some sort of benefits to be gained here. The trade-off isn't worth it. No businessman would go into a venture like that if it was about making money. No one would invest 10 Rand so that they could get back 5 Rand in return. Does that make sense? You invest in something that's sure to give you a positive reward. Alcohol is not that investment. It's not worth going there. Science is not on the side of the drinkers. Neither is the Scriptures. In our next episode, we will unpack the scriptural element in more detail, because a lot of Christians try to justify their drinking on the basis of some obscure Bible verses, many Bible verses, in fact, which seem to, on the surface of it, indicate that drinking is permissible for a Christian. Indeed, friends, we don't even want to go there. I encourage you to make a positive lifestyle decision even now to stay away from alcohol. It is deceptive and it will come back to bite you. And allow me to share a word of prayer with you. Heavenly Father, will you guide and direct the viewer in their thinking on this subject? Will you bring them liberation? Will you set them free? Will you help them to have the willpower and the desire to stay free of all these substances, including the socially acceptable ones, including alcohol? For we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.